Right. Like we're talking about, we've been really talking about trunking when we're passing some of these commands and stuff, and we weren't really understanding. So this is more like a diagrammatic representation of exactly what that trunking is. Remember, even when I give you guys that task that you did that switch port access. And as where did you learn switch port access from? Right? So, first of all, you have to set the VLAN, right? You have to set the VLAN, then give it switch, go to an interface and put switch port access, right? Now, this is literally like an explanation of what that does. So, and I think we can like draw a diagram, like to also explain VLAN, just in case you don't understand what VLAN is. Let's say this is like a router, a switch rather, right? Remember, a switch has many ports, right? It has the fast Ethernet port. It has the, what other port does it have? Exactly, gigabit ports, right? Now let's just use two. Say, this is fast Ethernet port. This is FA01, FA02, FA03, FA04. These are four different ports. Now, remember, VLAN is like virtual. It doesn't exist. It's not really a physical port, but it helps you do some sort of segmenting of ports. Remember, there was a time when we were running a command. What's that command that we ran again? You saw all the ports were all designated somewhere. It was all designated to the default, all the physical ports from fast Ethernet 0 to, from fast Ethernet 1 to 24. And the 2 gigabit ports, they were all designated to the default segment. We'll still even look at the different types of VLAN that we have. Right, but now, what VLAN can now enable you to do, like we've been talking about is now, you can now even decide to group these two VLANs. You can group these two VLAN and say this is VLAN 1. So virtually, those two ports are seeing themselves that they are like interconnected, they are in the same group. That's how they are seeing themselves, right? And this one now, you can now put this one VLAN 2. So that's why when you now, and this is the switch, this is virtual, right? Now when you now do this simple configuration now, when you do something like this now, sometimes people can now decide that, oh, this one is for phone. So you just specifically, now, because the configuration you might need for a phone and the one you might need for, let's say, internet, right, might be a little bit, different, or the one you might need for camera might be a little bit different configuration. That's why it's within a network, but they are for different need or use, right? Now, segmenting them, you can only do that because it's still the same Ethernet port you plug, right? It's still the same Ethernet. You plug to the ports, the LAN ports. Now, when you do this segmenting, even though, say you have a switch now, that switch now, a phone can be connected to that phone. How do you draw those landline phones now? You can connect that phone to the switch, and you can still even connect to a laptop too. You can still connect to that laptop. Even though you decide to connect from this switch direct to this laptop, it's still fine. So you see that the need for this laptop on that network and the need for this phone on that network is literally different. So that's one of the reasons why we do VLAN. So that's why when you see all the VLANs will always be by default, even as the word implies, it will always be in the default segment. All the LAN, all the ports will be on the default segment. So you can now decide to now send some to A, do this, A, you be in the VLAN. So when you Now, when you just call up a VLAN group, right? You can assign multiple to, like, you can create a VLAN and name it phone. You name that VLAN phone, and you assign these ports 3 and 4 there, so they will be there. So when you're doing a configuration for the phone VLAN, all of them will have that configuration. Now, the little part is that you will not be able to, once you segment your VLANs like this, you will not be able to connect, easily communicate. The VLAN 1 cannot communicate with VLAN 2 because they are like seeing themselves that they are from different worlds, right? So, but with the help of a router, that's why a layer 3 device, with the help of a router now, that is going to be possible, because the router, of course, will be the one providing the network and the IP addresses. So it will help you able to do all of that. Now, coming back to VLAN trunking, when we are doing all this configuration here and we do switch port access, right? In trunk, you do a little bit more configuration and you do switch port trunk, right? Like, as you can see this diagram explaining what access would do. Access cannot allow you, you can only assign one VLAN to a port. You see the gigabit port was assigned VLAN 100, right? And it's the PC1. The second gigabit port was assigned VLAN 200. But see switch port trunk, on the other hand, this is a trunk. A trunk can allow you assign multiple VLANs. You can assign multiple VLANs at the same time to, let's say this is your crossover Ethernet cable here. This is your crossover Ethernet cable. And you see, it was trunked. So it's connected via the gigabit 03 port on both sides, because 1, 2 has already been used. So the third port, right? And now you can see that if you want to send a trunking command, somebody wants to send VLAN 1 and 200, right? You can send VLAN 100 and 200 at the same time through the gigabit 01 port. That's what the trunking will do for you. But if it was just the switch port access, you would only have to send one VLAN instruction per port, right? Yeah. When we're talking about the VLAN types, so you can see that I think there is basically 3 types of VLAN, right? I don't know, however, you see, we have the default VLAN. And remember when we ran that command on our system and we saw something like this, especially when I gave us that classwork that, hey, create 2 VLANs and send so ports there. So this was really how it looked like. So you see that every other port, even before this now, even we haven't done this, every other port would be assigned to the VLAN, to the default VLAN. That's where all of them are by default. Now, when you create segments or different VLANs, you can now begin assigning. And then by default, we have other VLANs like the data and the voice and management, which is used for, management activities, of course. Then you can now assign, you can make it active, but by default, they will be inactive. You can even, and you can see that, so you can make it active, but by default, they will usually be inactive. So this is usually more like their default numberings. For data, it's usually VLAN 10. For voice, VLAN 30, VLAN 40. Then the FDDI default, VLAN 1004, and all of that, right? Reserved VLAN are more like those that you would. That's 0. That VLAN 0 and the VLAN 4095. you not really have access to it. It is for the system use only. It's just like even when we're assigning networks, we will not use the .0 and we will not use the .255. It's for loopback and all of that. And then VLAN 1 is the default VLAN too. So you would always see Cisco has its default VLAN being VLAN 1. Then from VLAN 2 to 1001 is a normal range where, hey, all of them, from extended range is usually from 1025. It's the normal range where you can, assign for whatever reasons you want to do. VLAN 2, VLAN 3, VLAN 4, and all of that. Then 1002 to 1005, you see, like the FDDI and and those other stuffs we're talking about. Like you can see here, this is the guys that uses from 1002 to 1005, right? So that's really what we're talking about. And of course, extended VLAN use is from 1025 to 4049. So I really want us to get to try out this network configuration. We kind of like are explaining some of the things that we've been really working on so that we get to have, better knowledge. Even some of these terms, you might still not understand them fully. But as you keep developing networks, you all come together easier. So initially, one thing we've always been doing is just one LAN network, right? We even worked on, used the home router, connected some wirelessly and all of that, right? But now we have two different networks. What makes these two networks is because we have two routers, right? So this router is responsible for this network. And so what you start seeing how to do this, because when you were even doing that configuration, you are seeing things like default gateway. So you see that here now, this thing you're seeing here now, that is the default gateway for this network. And then the router is having the IP address 1.1. You see that? And then it's extending every other point of which is extending to, right? Every other point of which is extending to. So the fast port here connected via this means here is 2.1. Where it's connecting here is 2.2. Now, this part of the network is a 3.0 network. So the IP addressing too will continue from here. This port point here, 3.1, you see, 3.2, this one, 3.10, 3.11, and a DNS server. But don't worry about DNS, we'll treat DNS shortly. Just put this as another PC. So let's get to try out this and we'll work on a correction.